Family tries to help out frozen dog, only to make an unexpected discovery. During a winter hike in the woods with his family, Darius and Marcus's youngest kid spots a little puppy in the yard of an old home. Darius wants to go inside the home, but a voice from within the house tells him to go away as he tries to climb the fence. But Darius had no intention of really playing it. Darius and his family had been told to leave by a voice coming from within the home, but he could not bear to abandon the dog outside in the snow. There was obviously something he needed to do. He leapt the fence against his better judgment, frightening his family on the other side and leaving everyone confused about what was going on. The unfortunate puppy was scarcely moving when he reached it, but otherwise seemed to be in excellent health. Darius attempted to pet it, but found that it was bone-chillingly cold. Carefully, he attempted to take it up, but found it more difficult than he had anticipated. Then he saw what was lying underneath it. Darius was so shocked that he almost let go of the animal. He had trouble accepting that as true. What the heck had just happened? He was in shock from what he had just seen and had no idea what to do. Should he keep attempting to get the dog out of the way? Should he continue what he was doing, or should he go immediately? Due to the house's relative isolation, the animal's consistent presence in the same location may have gone unnoticed. Imagining them all together in the sunshine and having a good time. A dog's preference for warm weather and sunshine was completely understandable, but what happened when winter came around? After then, the weather took a turn for the worse, and it gradually became more colder. When word spread that the small puppy was still outdoors, people were genuinely concerned for its safety. No one could fathom why somebody would leave such a little puppy outdoors in the cold and rain. People would stop by and try to touch him or coax him over to the fence's edge, but the animal would constantly return to the same spot in the yard. Even if it may appear alarming today, that was not always the case. The dog had always seemed fit and trim, with a shiny coat of hair. That his owner loved and cared for the dog was assumed by everybody. They were only concerned about the dog's exposure to the elements. Nobody did anything about the dog's sad and silent demeanor. Some curious onlookers pondered making a break for it over the short fence and letting the homeowner have it one day. As the days wore on and the temperature dropped, it was natural to worry about the dog's well-being because it spent so much time outdoors. The number of individuals walking past the home gradually decreased. The dog stayed there in the same position day and night. Most people walked past the home on their way to the forest for a trek, which sounded great until you realized how cold your fingers were becoming. And then, after a time, the first snowflakes began to fall. The dog, however, remained outdoors where no one could provide him with shelter from the snow. The dog slept in the backyard of the home for 2 weeks with no one bothering him. In response to the dangerously low temperatures, residents huddled inside their houses near the warmth of the fire. Fortunately, this dog found a home with loving owners. Since the first snowflake fell, the Thompsons had been in a terrific mood and were making the most of the situation. They enjoyed the snow because it allowed them to do things that anybody would enjoy doing in the snow. Therefore, they went for a hike in the woods one day. They bundled up and continued on their journey. They took pleasure in strolling in the snow and looking at the wintry landscape. They were animal lovers, but had not heard of this dog. The family wasn't all that acquainted with the ancient home or the dog in the backyard since they had never gone this road before and the woodland trek hadn't seemed enticing to them in the summer or the winter. They would not have seen the adorable puppy before that day. It was really close that they didn't see the small dog the first time they drove by. All of the front yard garden was blanketed with a light covering of snow, making it difficult to make out the plants underneath. Marcus, the youngest of the family, was the one who saw the puppy. Since he had not anticipated seeing a home in this location, he had been keeping a careful check on it. He began shouting, "Dad, Dad, there is a dog in the garden," at his close father. Peered in the direction his son was pointing, and he, too, saw the dog. He was first taken aback by the sight of a dog in the yard. Eventually, the dog was uncovered from behind the snow. The family was surprised to see it in the same area. And despite the fact that it was snowing and the temperature was far below freezing, the dog seemed just as healthy as usual. It was clear that the dog was unfazed by the snow and, in fact, was enjoying himself once you got near enough. Darius realized this obviously wasn't true. There and there, Darius faced a life or death choice. Darius tried to get over the fence without thinking twice, despite the shoot-on-sight warning. As soon as he touched the fence, a booming voice came from the dilapidated home. Darius felt a tinge of fear. "Get off my land immediately, or I will shoot you," the guy inside the house yelled at him. After a moment of hesitation, Darius withdrew his hand. He was at a loss for words. He didn't know whether he should just leave the unfortunate animal outdoors or try to save it. So he yelled back that whomever was threatening him better bring the dog in from the cold or he'd contact animal control. Yet, when he shared all that, he received no reaction. Did he really think he could rescue the dog without being shot himself? From his perspective, it was completely absurd. He couldn't bear the thought of abandoning the dog to its death. There must be something he could do to safeguard their safety. A simple solution sprung into his head, and he motioned for his loved ones to join him. They walked farther into the woods after he screamed at the house that they were leaving. It was obvious what needed to be done to rescue the dog without endangering his family. He was crouched low, moving stealthily through the snow-covered shrubs. He inched his way toward the house until he was seated against its back. There was also a door next to him. Unfortunately, this was his last chance to get in. Is it wise to participate, though? Darius placed his hand on the doorknob and attempted to open it as quietly as possible. Incredible as it may have seemed, the door did in fact unlock and open for him. Was he really considering going in? He wasn't sure what to do and didn't want to put himself in danger by making the incorrect choice. He quietly opened the door, so whomever was inside probably didn't hear a thing, and he certainly didn't hear anybody shouting at him. Though, how far he could go without making a sound was anyone's guess. In addition, he was in the house for no good reason. Darius knew it was a stupid plan, but he didn't want to quit up now that he'd come this far. He was set on taking action, no matter how ridiculous it may seem. He took a deep breath and quietly entered the room, closing the door behind him. He began his hunt for the second-floor stairs very cautiously and primarily by feel. It was clear that no one was occupying this level. Closed windows meant there was no way for anybody to see him from inside. That ruled out the ground level as a possible hiding spot, leaving just the second story as a viable option. He eventually located the stairwell and began up it, but he saw nothing but darkness the whole way. On the second floor, he reached an unexpected conclusion. But what, exactly, was he beginning to understand as he tiptoed along? The atmosphere on the upper level was very similar to that on the lower level. All the windows were shuttered here as well, and he was beginning to think that nobody was really at home. It made no sense for them to be sitting in the dark while the sky was so clear. Who then might it have been that shouted at him just now? Perhaps that was documented in advance. Whatever it was of little consequence at the moment. After determining that he was safe from gunfire, Darius went to see the dog in the backyard. The only reason he had gone inside the home was to make sure he was okay and had everything he needed to care for the dog. They no longer had to worry about him or his family's safety. Darius exited the home via the back door once again, and he sprinted around the house. Instead of trying to sneak through the rear door, he would use the front. He might enter from the front, where the dog would be less likely to be startled. He made another attempt to scale the fence and enter the front garden, but this time he was met by a kind voice calling out to him. "If you don't leave the premises immediately, you'll get shot." Exactly the same time after he touched the fence, with the same tone of voice, he heard it again. By this point, Darius's conviction only grew. It was obviously a recorded. He was now quite confident in his choice, reasoning that no one inside the home could possibly be armed. Darius hopped the fence without a second thought and walked right up to the still-moving dog. It had not moved from its previous location in the least. Just like it always has been. He was relieved to be able to bring the dog inside, away from the cold. He decided to take it with him. Darius realized he couldn't afford to waste time. He didn't feel comfortable being here, even if the recorded message in the home was fake. He knelt down, wrapped his arms around the dog, and attempted to lift it. The unfortunate animal needed to be in the care of his family so that they could take it to the vet together. Possibly it was not too late. Perhaps they can rescue the stray dog and give it a good home, rather than the people who have been leaving it outdoors all the time. The dog, which had suddenly ceased all movement as Darius took it up, seemed to be immobilized. Darius tried raising it gently at first, but after failing to get it high enough, he decided to give it his all. There wasn't any chain or other physical restraint on the dog that he could see, so it had to be something else. Darius was startled when the dog suddenly escaped. He could not believe his eyes as he stood up and saw what had been keeping the dog in place. The sight of it, together with the puppy that had escaped from his grasp, left him dumbfounded. Is this what it all amounted to? Some of the power cords had obviously simply come unplugged. The dog's belly was really his bottom, as he discovered to his dismay. Not a canine, but rather a robotic one. Darius was caught off guard and had no clue what this may imply. There's a robot dog in the front yard? Darius, at a loss for what to do next, called the authorities. He hoped they would be able to explain what the heck was going on and he could finally rest. In that case, maybe he'd realize why there's a robot dog parked in front of a deserted home. This place really served as home to an elderly, reclusive guy. He had a soft spot for pets until his health declined to the point that he could no longer provide for them. Still, he planned to spend the rest of his life surrounded by animals, particularly dogs. His whole property was populated with robotic pets, including the dog in the yard. Now that he's gone, the animals have remained there, apparently planning to make their way around the home on their own until the electricity is shut off. Since none of the elderly man's living relatives were willing to accept the animals, he was forced to keep them. The cops eventually shut off the electricity and sealed up the residence. No one in the family ever stepped forward to stake a claim to the property despite being advised of this option. Unlike the elderly guy, they didn't seem to be too concerned. Instead, they ignored it and carried on as usual. The home is now primarily a site of folklore, with most of the electronic creatures having been taken by teenagers from a neighboring city, leaving behind just a husk as the last memorial to a guy who really cared about animals in his latter years. And some great anecdotes for animal-loving families like Darius that made the trip to help the poor creatures.